Let's be honest. Most of us at some point felt like we're behind financially. Maybe you've compared yourself to your friends' vacations, their new cars, their home upgrades, or even that Instagram post. But what if I told you that you might be doing better than you think? In fact, there are several under-the-radar indicators that suggest you're right on track, even if it doesn't feel like it right now. One way to stay on the right track, by the way, is to hit that like button. Let's walk through the 5 signs that you're richer than you think. The first sign you're doing better than you think is simple, but powerful. You live on less than you make. It sounds so basic, but not as common as a financial behavior as you would think. The term paycheck to paycheck gets thrown around a lot, and it can mean different things to different people, but according to the Bank of America Institute, living paycheck to paycheck essentially means you use all of your monthly income on necessities like rent, groceries, utilities, with little or nothing left over. And according to their recent study, nearly half of Americans fall into this category.
I just checked and, well, it's just that all my money is gone.
So if you've created even a small buffer between your income and your expenses, you're already doing better than nearly half the country. Maybe even more than half the country, since a lot of folks are actually living above their means. But the margin created by living on less than you make, even if it's just a few dollars a week, is where wealth begins. It might not feel like you're ahead if you're driving an older car or living in a modest apartment, but living below your means is the foundation of financial health. So why is that? Because wealth building comes down to 3 ingredients. That's discipline, money, and time. Living on less than you make is the discipline part. It creates the margin of money that allows you to save and invest, and given enough time, that margin grows into real wealth. So if you're living within your means, take a moment to acknowledge the discipline it takes. That discipline is not only rare, it's the hardest part. Number 2 is that you have a fully funded emergency fund. The emergency fund is not something that gets a lot of fanfare. It's not flashy, you don't get to post about it, but if you have one, you're quietly operating at a higher financial level than many Americans. In fact, nearly 1 in 5 Americans say they have no emergency savings according to Bankrate. If you've managed to sock away 3 to 6 months of basic living expenses, that's a huge win. Not only are you shielded from surprise expenses like a car repair or sudden job loss, but you're also protecting yourself from making those desperate decisions like liquidating long-term investments, using credit cards. When you don't have to tap into your 401k or sell investments to cover an emergency, you preserve the magic of compounding interest and avoid penalties. And here's the big thing. Having an emergency fund shows that you've transitioned from reactive to proactive with your financial behavior. You're no longer scrambling to put out the financial fires, you're preventing future fires from burning the whole thing down. That shift, while invisible to others, is one of the clearest signs that you're thinking like a builder of wealth. The next is that compound interest is working for you. We mentioned earlier that it's the magic of wealth building, but it can be a curse if you aren't careful. There are really 3 stages of compounding interest. First, it's working against you. This is when you're buried in high interest debt like credit cards. Unfortunately, that's where almost 50% of Americans find themselves, carrying a balance month to month. That 20% interest rate on their credit card is a powerful force, and if you're not paying it down, you're losing ground fast, especially if your investments are earning what in a good year is 10% or less. That's essentially a 10% loss on every dollar you could have used to pay off that debt. The second stage is when compound interest isn't doing anything for you. Maybe you've paid off that high interest debt and you're saving, but it's all sitting in cash. That's not a bad place to be when you're building an emergency fund, but over the long term, uninvested cash loses purchasing power due to inflation. It's important to be aggressive in building those cash reserves as you can move on to that third magical stage of compounding interest. And that's when compound interest is actually working for you. And if you're there, even in a small way, that's a massive win. What a lot of people miss is that once you start investing consistently, you're transitioning from selling your time for money to the most exciting asset building through actually investing, which will flip that script and allow you to own your time that much sooner. You're building investments that will work while you sleep and maybe even vacation. And eventually those dollars will work so hard that they work harder than you can with your back, your brain, and even your hands. The sooner you start, the easier your journey will be, and no amount will be too small. That $100, automated and invested monthly, it's going to smooth out the ups and downs of the market and removes emotions from the process. If you're investing automatically into your 401k or brokerage account, you're ahead of the curve. And in no time, you'll be doing what you want, when you want, and how you want because of your hardworking army of dollar bills. This one might surprise you, but the fourth sign is that you don't show off your wealth. If your lifestyle doesn't scream rich, you might actually be richer than you think. There's a quote you've probably heard: wealth is what you don't see. It's the car you didn't buy, the bigger house you didn't stretch your wallet for, the watch you didn't upgrade. Thomas Stanley, the author of The Millionaire Next Door, found that most US millionaires live in homes worth less than $500,000. Over 60% have never spent more than $30,000 on a vehicle. Now look, with the context of understanding this was data released in 1996, so these numbers have likely changed a bit, but the takeaway still remains the same. The outward signs of wealth often don't reflect actual net worth. In many cases, flashy lifestyles are fueled by debt or higher incomes with low savings rates. If your income has gone up over the years, but your lifestyle is not inflated at the same rate, that's a powerful indicator that you're preserving your ability to build wealth. It's extremely valuable if you can minimize lifestyle inflation, and it's one of the most effective wealth building habits you can have. When you keep your expenses from expanding faster than your income grows, your wealth building margin grows too, and that margin is where you can accelerate and even skyrocket your wealth. So if you feel like you're living beneath your means, and maybe friends or family have even commented that you could afford to spend more, take that as a compliment. You're resisting the gravitational pull of consuming more. And if you can resist that pull and instead rocket yourself towards wealth, it can pay off big time down the road. Last but definitely not least, if you have a clear plan for your money, you're operating in rarefied air. A 2024 Schwab study found that only 36% of Americans have a written financial plan. That means 2/3 of people are actually just winging it. But having a plan doesn't mean you need a 50-page financial document. It could be as straightforward as following our 9-step framework of what to do with your next dollar. Something like the old reliable financial order of operations, or the FOO, as we like to call it. The FOO walks you through where your next dollar is likely going to serve you the best, from getting your employer match, to paying down high interest debt, to using your money to build the life you want. The point is, when you have a plan, you stop reacting to your finances and start commanding them. You don't wonder what to do with your tax refund. You already know. You don't get paralyzed by what to do when your income increases. You allocate it with intention, and that intentionality compounds just like your investments do. So, if you even have a loose plan, a budget, a retirement savings strategy, or just a target net worth you're working towards, you're already ahead of most of your peers. And if you're following the FOO, oh baby, do we love to hear that. You're taking your financial life seriously, and that clarity is a huge advantage. To sum it all up, being rich isn't always about having a 7-figure net worth or living in the big mansion on a hill. It's often about the choices you make day to day. If you live on less than you make, have an emergency fund, are investing consistently, and you're even resisting lifestyle inflation, and you have a plan for every dollar, then by most practical measures, you're doing well. Maybe even better than you think, and that's worth celebrating. It's the sum of those small but powerful decisions that will one day have you living your great, big, beautiful tomorrow.